The path to the Senate presidency is clear for re-elected Senator Juan Miguel Zubiri. After a near contest, Senator Cynthia Villar said she's dropping her bid for the third highest post in the land. Zubiri will join looming House Speaker Martin Romualdez, the president-elect's first cousin, in forming a so-called supermajority in both chambers. With Marcos allies dominating the 19th Congress, can our lawmakers make sure that they can effectively exercise the system of checks and balances in a democracy? Good evening, I'm Ruth Cabal sitting in for Pia Ontiveros. Welcome to your weekly political appointment fix, politics as usual. Our first guest, Senator Francis Tolentino, joining us via Zoom. Good evening to you, Senator.
Good evening, Ruth. Good evening to the viewers as well.
Senator, what do you think about what's going to happen in the Senate under the 19th Congress? First of all, Senate President, do you think Senator Mig Zubiri is a sure winner already?
Well, it has to undergo a final process, consultation, but I think if, as he claims he has the numbers, it might end up that way.
May ibang reports from sources saying 13 votes are needed, but saying 12 votes na daw. Sure na daw yan with Senator Zubiri.
That's what others are claiming. So I'm not privy to the initial discussions, but I think it is going to be that way.
Pero kayo po, sino-sino po? Kasi lumalabas na names, di ba, Senator Zubiri and then Senator Cynthia Villar, you have Chisa Escudero, Gatchalian. Sino po kayo ang napupusuan nyo?
Let us leave it that way. It's going to be a conclave of the senators deciding that. So I'll be joining the majority, rest assured.
But for you, what do you think would make a good Senate president?
A Senate president should continue to project the independence of the Senate. A Senate president should be able to be the cohesive bond, so to speak, of all the 24, including himself, senators. The Senate president should be at the forefront of projecting not just the independence, but the proactiveness of the Senate in terms of coming out with effective legislative measures, especially as we are now coming out of the pandemic.
Some of those you mentioned, independence, yung ensuring cohesion, and being proactive. Do you think, tanong ko lang po, do you think Senator Zubiri has that?
All of them are qualified. All of them, if they rally behind a single person, will definitely have that. And Senator Zubiri, I think, can also project himself that way.
When you say also that you will be with the majority, ano po yung nakikita nyo ngayon? Kasi obviously it's going to look like a supermajority both in the Senate and the House.
So majority in a sense that it will not be a majority that will be a rubber stamp. A majority that will, again, I have repeated this several times, a majority that would project independence, a majority that will work for the benefit of the Filipino people. You
mentioned earlier that there are still talks and usually pinagbobotohan, but you know, we all know how it goes in the Senate na napag-uusapan na rin naman, and there are negotiations. Even sila Senator Cynthia Villar were saying, and even the minority like Senator Ontiveros are saying they are talking to other senators. Pero kayo po sa ngayon, napag-usapan na rin yung mga committee chairmanships. Meron po ba kayong gusto na committee na i-lead po or to be the chairman?
I think I'm being offered the Blue Ribbon Committee, and I would strive to be a performer in whatever committee I will be placed. Rest assured.
But do you also, Senator Zubiri mentioned that he's looking at you to head the Blue Ribbon Committee. Kayo po ba? Gusto niyo po ba yan? And ano ang nakita niyong possible challenges?
Well, challenges is, you know how the Blue Ribbon Committee works. It's a combination of prosecutorial in aid of legislation and what have you. So we'll try to have a, if that will push through, we'll try to project the Blue Ribbon Committee as the prime Senate committee. But yung tanong mo kanina, if I have other committees in mind, definitely I have.
Like what, sir?
Siguro Committee on National Defense.
Defense. Okay. Yung isa pa pong tanong ko din, follow-up dito sa possibly heading the Blue Ribbon Committee. Kasi po, kayo po ay kilalang kaalyado ni President Duterte and also you supported the unit team din po with President-elect Marcos. How can you ensure that your committee will be independent in conducting investigations?
I think my track record will show that. Definitely previous committee hearings, even though if I was not the chairman, I was able to project my independence. The most recent committee hearing probably was the stoppage of the online sabong. And modesty aside, I attended all hearings.
Isa po sa parang mapag-iwanan po ni Senator Gordon as chair of the Blue Ribbon Committee, itong investigation ng Senado sa Farmally. And Senator Risa Ontiveros is saying she's open to filing a resolution to possibly reopen. What's your stand on that? Reopen the investigation? Kasi hindi po nag-prosper yung...
It has to be a committee decision. First of all, I'm not the chairman. But you have to realize, as early as October 11, I have filed 6 or 5 bills relative to Farmally, all in aid of legislation. Even while the Farmally hearing was ongoing, I filed multiple bills to correct the flaws and deficiencies in our procurement laws. I've done that. The records will show. Stamp received by the Senate, October 11, 2021.
But Senator, may I just know, you're a member of the Blue Ribbon Committee dito under kay Chair Gordon, but you didn't sign the draft committee report.
Yes, but the purpose of the hearing was to come up with legislative measures. And as I have told you, ako yung nauna. Nag-hearing pa lang, palagay ko ako lang po yung nag-file ng legislative measures confronting head-on Farmally. Look at the records. Baka wala pang na-file yung Blue Ribbon Committee because of the report, pero ako as early as last year, ito lang sabi ko, ito yung kailangan baguhin batas. Procurement law. We have to change the we have to change the procedure relative to Republic Act 9184. We have to change the warehousing rules. We have to change some provisions of the local government code. Yun na yung endpoint nun eh. And as a lawyer, ginawa ko yun.
Okay, sir.
Even as being a mere member of the committee, ito na yun, I delivered.
Limited time lang po tayo, sir. Last na lang po. If ever you will get to head the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee, ano na po yung nakikita nyo ngayon na gusto nyong tutukan or possible investigations that you want to conduct?
Let's see. As early as 2 months ago, I've been saying something about the reported SSS net losses. Let's see how it will evolve. It will evolve.
Thank you very much for your insights and for your time, Senator Francis Tolentino. And we'll be back after a quick break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. This is Politics as usual. I'm Ruth Cabal. Our next guests, former Senator Orly Mercado and analyst Richard Haydarian. Good evening to you, gentlemen.
Good evening, folks.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Orly.
Good evening, Richard.
Sir Orly, I'll start with you. As a former senator, what can you say about the new Senate composition under the 19th Congress, the upcoming 19th Congress?
Lagi ko nadidinig yung majority, super majority. You know, nung nare-establish ang, pardon my going back to history, but you know, hindsight is important. Ganon din ang question eh. Baka wala mag-object sa inyo. 24 kami kandidato, 22 won. Ang minority lang nun, si Johnny Ponce Enrile at saka si Erap Estrada. So, people are saying, what kind of a Senate would that be? There should be a super majority, etc. It was President Koreakin who said, don't worry about that. These people, you have 24 independent republics, dyan manggagaling ng opposition. Kaya napaka-importante maintindihan sa majority na disagreement does not necessarily mean disloyalty. You can be part of the supermajority, and any practical politician will join the majority. How can you get your committees? How can you get your work done? How can you pursue your advocacies? Unless you are in the majority, these are critical. So the realities, nagbabanggaan yung realities of politics, and when to speak out because you think that it is in the public interest, and you are actually helping the majority and helping the administration by pointing out things that are going wrong or are askew.
So looking at the composition now, Senator, anong tingin niyo po doon sa, even with the nuance, yung binanggit niyo kanina halimbawa na they would join the majority because of, their advocacies. I think I heard si incoming Senator-elect Tulfo saying that also, no? Na parang he's joining the majority because of his advocacies also, and yung committee chairmanship. Yung mga tao po mismo o yung nanalong senador ngayon, what do you think?
See, we sometimes lose our focus on what the role of the Senate is. It's a policy-making body. It is a deliberative, collegial body that makes laws. And you're not a rubber stamp. You have a mandate. You're elected by an electorate, the same electorate that elects the president and the vice president. So that gives you the important role of supporting legislation that will actually help our people in the end, and can hopefully be easily passed, and that's fine. In a government wherein there is a meeting of minds between the policymaker and the policy implementer, unlike its fusion in a parliamentary form of government. Ang importante rito, naintindihan natin na ang objective dito is to make laws. Kasi mambabaw yung understanding ng sinasabing, majority yan. Ibig sabihin, wala lang mag-o-object. Sino pa mag-o-object? You're generalizing. Because I'm sure from the senators, there will come out people who will really disagree. And they will break away when they feel they cannot sacrifice their principles.
Okay. Let me ask Professor Heydarian, what do you think about the looming supermajority in both houses?
Well, this is not anything new, right? This is what we also got in 2019. In fact, in 2019, the opposition did even worse, right? Not a single one from opposition made it. At least this time, you could argue at least one with Rizal Ontiveros. In fact, more if you bring in Jesus Escudero and others who were part of the Grand Alliance of the opposition. But the question is, what do you do with this supermajority? President Duterte didn't make much out of it. I think everyone was thinking, now that you have supermajority, they're going to railroad the constitutional change, etc. It didn't happen, right? So it depends how the coordination is going to happen. And let's not forget, we don't have real political parties in this country. The Unity Team is not a political party. It's a tactical alliance. And the thing with tactical alliances is that whether lang yan. So it's very possible that they were together during the election campaign. In the case of Zubiri, he defected to the other side, and we understand why this stuff are happening. But later on, as the Senate kicks off and important issues, high-stakes issue come into picture, I think that's where magkakaalaman na kung sino talagang majority, sinong hindi. I think there are going to be roughly three kinds of groups. There are going to be the yes men and yes women. Let's just be honest about it. We're not going to name names. And then there are going to be people in the middle who are going to try to, have it both ways. Some could call them fence-sitters or independents. And then there are going to be those who are going to feel, well, if the next administration is not as effective, or if the public opinion is shifting, maybe they'll gravitate more towards opposition. I mean, so far, Rizal Ontiveros is clear as the opposition one. But I think there'll be more and more down the road if the incoming administration doesn't live up to the expectations. I mean, the expectations are really high on incoming President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. So in that sense, it may look like a supermajority on the surface, but the coherence of that, the crystallization of that is highly questionable in light of the fact that we have no political parties. But the trend lines is clear. Since the reintroduction of democracy in 1986, 1987, the situation of political dynasties in the Philippine Congress has deteriorated. We went from around 60% in 1987 to more than 80% in 2013. And now, bati sa Senado, meron magkapatid. Dalawa pa yata yung magkapatid. Meron mag-ina. So even the Senate, which used to be the august body, a little bit above the fray, the training ground of the next president, we see that the broader trend lines in the lower house is also affecting them. So that tells you about the regressive trajectory of Philippine democracy, for that matter.
So sa tingin mo, it will still be independent, as yung sinasabi ni Senator Orly na you have 24 republics pa rin. In the last Senate, we saw na hindi nag-materialize yung halimbawa, the death penalty, reimposition of the death penalty, charter change, and then they conducted an investigation on ABS-CBN and other
depende
controversial
yan. So there are
issues.
going to be issues whereby you need majority, right? So you need more than 12, for instance. And then there are going to be issues whereby you need supermajority, 2/3, for instance, constitutional change, right? So siguro dun sa iba, baka majority is now more doable, especially if Ferdinand Marcos plays it well with the leadership here and there. Zubiri was part of the campaign, etc. But I think that on the supermajority part, baka medyo mas mahirapan ng incoming administration. So hindi given na porkit konting opposition, magiging supermajority on all issues. So I think the devil is in the details. So the more high-stakes issues, the more potentially divisive, that's where magkakaalaman sino ba talaga ang yes man at sino ba talaga more independent.
You have to see them talagang buckle down to work. Now, we'll continue our discussion. We'll be right back after a quick break. Stay with us. We're on our final stretch. Still with us, former Senator Orly Mercado and analyst Richard Haydarian. Sir Orly, let's talk about minority. How important is it to have a minority in every Congress? Yes.
You know, sa parliamentary form, lalo na katulad sa Great Britain, ang tawag sa opposition is Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition. That means that when you disagree, you're not really being disloyal. In fact, you have a very important function, and that is, as a senator, whatever party you belong to, to point out where things are going wrong, especially in a country where, like ours, where our democratic institutions have not yet taken roots in many areas. And we are still battling the scourge of corruption. I think it is very important that we have these checks and balances. Because if you abdicate that, you're a political leader, somebody else will take over. And it will be taken over, like media will take over to do the fiscalizing, etc. While within the institution, whether there are charges later on that are filed, etc., and sometimes there are complaints, oh, you're investigating in aid of re-election and not in aid of legislation. But let us not go into motives. But I agree also that cooperation between the legislative and executive branches is critical. I think we still have memories of the LEDAC discussions during the time of President Ramos, and that has worked. There were critical issues, and today we are facing very critical issues. Kung mapapalabas natin yung mga batas mas mabilis. Pero napakabigat existential issues climate change, yung power issue, dependence on oil, etc. Our problems with food prices, etc. All of these things require cooperation. If Congress can pass it fast and implement, and the executive branch can implement it faster, then we're fine. Because the problem with legislation also is that you have many laws that are not funded properly and implemented well. It is in the implementation. It's another world. And meron function din ang Senate, even the House of Representatives, of oversight. And you also approve the budget, and that gives you the leverage to be able to demand and question, demand the information, and find out how, give the evidence that they're spending the funds properly. These are very critical issues for governance, and I think we should not lose the sight of it. Whether at times you cooperate, etc. Tayo kasi, bakit ngayon, nung araw, kalaban ng presidente, bakit ano? Let's all think and focus on what is going to be achieved and what should be achieved.
Professor, Sir Orly told us yung important role ng minority. Ngayon, sa tingin niya sa lineup ngayon, who could best lead the minority? Senator Ontiveros is saying they're talking to 3 or 4 people, and then Senator Coco is saying he's possibly joining the minority.
Yeah, we had a big surprise, right? Everyone's thinking Cynthia Villar, she would be in a strong position. She topped the race in 2019. But Mig Zubiri, he came from behind and he eventually ended up there. So I think the internal conversations on collegiality, to be able to work with each other is very important. I remember very well a few years ago, I was talking to one of the opposition senators. He was saying, I and Tito Soto don't agree on everything, but in fairness to him, the way he handles, he creates this essentially a venue and platform for proper and respectful exchange. That was very important in his selection as a Senate president. So I think the same thing will apply in terms of also minority leader or majority leader and other factors like that. And of course, many would hope that at least Riza Ontiveros will be in some sort of leadership position, considering the fact that against all odds, she was able to achieve this position and that she's the closest to a clear, crystal clear opposition for that matter, yeah.
And then, sa tingin niyo ba, who could possibly join them with the roster now? Because they're saying 3 to 4 others. They're talking to 3 to 4 others.
Yeah, I heard Senator Cayetano. Escudero. Yeah. A number of this, let's call them more centrist, independent-minded folks. Cayetano was very strongly aligned with President Duterte, but the same thing doesn't apply with President Marcos Jr., right?
Yes,
so I think, and then with Chizo Escudero, in fairness, he was part of the opposition. I remember on election day, he said that he voted for Lenny. So he's very clear about his preferences for the opposition. Maybe a lot of folks on the other side underestimate his independence or his opposition leaning. So I think this is a chance for them to work it out. But I think Riza definitely is the face of what is closest to the opposition. I completely agree with Orly. I think in our country, there's a misunderstanding of the role of the opposition or what is checks and balances. Because either we go into loyal opposition in the wrong sense, yung kunyari lang opposition.
Or yung maingay talaga.
Or obstructionist. When the reality is that a true opposition is somewhere in the middle. You're not obstructionist, but you're going to check the excesses of the other side. So may mga issue, tama si Carly, na for instance, yung economic recovery natin, this is a big issue. Climate change is a big issue. If you look at the proposal ni Marcos, yung mga gusto niya priorities sa incoming budget, he's now been given the prerogative to have some say. It's all economics and recovery and health. And I think on that issue, dapat hindi obstructionist ang opposition or shouldn't come off as obstructionist. That's political suicide. But there are going to be other issues. Historical revisionism, denialism, constitutional change, major contentious. Let's look at that. Robin Padilla is going to take over constitutional amendments. That's going to be something interesting. Everyone's going to watch out. Anong kinalabasan yan? Magiging amendment ba ito or constitutional change altogether? So I think that's where we can have a more healthy checks and balance process and proper exchanges within the Senate.
You already mentioned some of yung possible priority legislation. Siguro, last question for you gentlemen. What do you think our kababayans can do to demand accountability from both the Senate and the House, that they're supermajority right now? We start with you, Sir Orly.
Well, one of the things that has not also been fully understood is the investigations that are made by the committee, which is nicknamed the Blue Ribbon Committee, Committee Investigations. Anong napaka-importante niyan eh. And in fact, dapat sinusuportahan yan ng Malacanang eh. Kasi you cannot watch out for everybody. And you cannot also cover up and give a blanket instruction na akong bahala sa inyo. Sapagkat dito sa mga napaka-importanteng bagay ng paggasta ng pera ng taong bayan, dapat talagang we can make sure that we are held, men and women who are given the responsibility are held accountable. So sa akin, I think in the final analysis, our opposition and positions, whether you're in the opposition or the majority, can change, but it must change only largely because of the fact that you are following the interest of the greater majority of our people.
Professor.
Yeah, Senate is extremely important. This has been traditionally the training ground of not only fiscalizers. People say all sorts of things about sino nagtatop ng Senate races in the past decade or so. But let's not forget, we had people like Jovito Salonga who topped the race not once, but 3 times. Human rights people, PhD Yale. Those were the kind of people elected to the Senate. But I'm not saying sila lang dapat. But we need fiscalizers inside the Senate. People who are going to be bastions of independence, who are going to stand for the rights of the people. And yun nga, minsan feeling ko hindi na nataan ano ba talagang trabaho ng legislator. Hindi sila mayor, governor, or presidente, right? At the same time, of course, we also need people to work together on important issues, and so that we can find a kind of functional consensus to get ourselves out of all of the challenges we're facing as a country. And lastly, I don't know, I think if you're Marcos Jr., with all of those stereotypes of what the Marcoses could bring about, authoritarian, I think if a Senate is effective and shows independence, that's also good for Marcos. That's good for our democracy, and it's something positive that we can all build on.
Thank you very much to our guests tonight. And as we've been told before, don't talk politics at the dinner table or at a family reunion or in Viber groups, and risk digital warfare. But we can talk about it here at this table on this show, your weekly political appointment fix, politics as usual. I'm Ruth Cabal, sitting in for P. Ontiveros. Catch the next episode of Politics as Usual on Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Good evening.